The first breath of a Genestealer's curse is never marked by a scream or a wound that bleeds. It begins in silence, in the shadow of a hive corridor or within the forgotten dark of some void ship's belly. You don't feel the claws at first. You feel only the stare. Eyes that pierce not flesh but will. And when they strike, it is not merely the rending of bone or the tearing of skin, it is the invasion of something deeper, a violation that threads itself into the marrow of what makes you human. This is the fate of those who encounter the broodkin. To become something less than human yet more than beast. To walk in the daylight of the Imperium with your face unchanged, your heart still beating, your hands still working, yet every thought no longer yours. You become the vessel of a hunger older than any empire, a hunger that stretches across void and eternity, whispering through the blood you now share with monsters. Before we step deeper into this, the first meeting with a Genestealer is never announced. There is no warning siren, no vox command screaming for civilians to flee. It comes in the quietest places of a world already weighed down by shadows. In the dark belly of a hive city, where the air is thick with the chemical stink of the manufacturer, or in the silent void of a drifting freighter, where the lights flicker in perpetual half-death, the first touch waits. Imagine a worker returning home after a shift of endless drudgery, their hands raw from pressing plasteel into the same shape 1,000 times over, their lungs stung by the taste of promethium dust that seeps through cracked respirators. Their thoughts are numb, their faith in the Emperor worn thin by years of hunger and toil. They step through corridors where light has not touched in decades, moving past walls slick with condensation, where only vermin scuttle and the occasional servitor lurches in its broken gate. It is here, in the blind corners of civilization, that the Genestealer waits. It does not announce itself with thunder, it is a whisper of motion, a scrape of claws across rusted flooring, a sense that something inhuman is watching from the angles of the corridor where no man dares to linger. And then, silence. The worker pauses, hearing nothing. The fear builds like static in the air. Their pace quickens, their hand brushing the aquila around their neck, whispering a half-forgotten prayer to him on terror. But prayers are thin armor against the creature that steps from the shadows. The Genestealer moves with a grace that should not belong in this universe of iron and stone. Its body is all sleek muscle and armored chitin, its limbs spread wide like the arms of a predator about to embrace. Its eyes glimmer with an alien sheen, black orbs that reflect no mercy. The worker does not scream. The scream dies in their throat, strangled by terror, because what meets them is not simply a beast, it is a presence. It crashes into their senses with the weight of inevitability. The claws strike, but not to kill. Not yet. They pierce flesh with a careful precision, sharp enough to draw blood, gentle enough to spare life, and as the worker collapses under the alien's strength, they feel the true violation, the kiss of the ovipositor, sliding like molten fire into their body, a parasitic communion masked as intimacy. It is neither fast nor merciful, it is drawn out, deliberate, as if the Genestealer takes satisfaction in the moment of rewriting. And then, just as suddenly, it is over. The creature withdraws, its chittering voice echoing in tones too alien for the human mind to grasp. The worker gasps, clutching at the wound that is already sealing, the blood clotting unnaturally fast. They expect death. Instead, they are left alive, their body trembling, their vision blurred by sweat and tears. When they look up, the Genestealer is gone. It melts back into the shadows, vanishing as though it were never there at all. The silence returns. Only the worker remains, kneeling in filth, their breath ragged. Their thoughts are no longer their own. At first, it is only a faint echo in the skull, an alien murmur at the edge of consciousness. They try to shake it away, to bury it beneath work and prayer. They clutch their aquila harder. But no prayer, no faith, no memory of family can smother the whisper. In time, the whisper grows into visions, nightmares of shapes beneath alien stars, of vast leviathans drifting in the void, of teeth and hunger endless as the galaxy itself. They dream of claws breaking stone, of worlds consumed, of flesh offering itself willingly to the swarm. And beneath the horror, there is something worse, a strange, undeniable comfort, a warmth in the hunger, a sense of belonging. The worker wakes, drenched in sweat, heart pounding with terror, yet hands reaching for the phantom embrace of the monster. They should feel revulsion. They should feel hatred. Instead they feel longing. This is the first curse of the Genestealer, that its victims are not only marked, not only enslaved, but made to love their chains. The next day the worker goes to labor, as if nothing has happened. Their wounds have closed, leaving no scar. Their face betrays no trauma. Their eyes remain human, their stride unchanged, but something deep within has shifted forever. They are now a seed, a carrier, a herald of the great devourer, and though no one around them can see it, the end of their world has already begun. The days that follow blur together in a haze of exhaustion and obsession. The worker no longer counts shifts by the toll of factory bells or the ration lines that coil endlessly through the lower spires. Instead, they mark time by the intervals of the voice within their mind, the pulse of alien thought that grows clearer with every waking hour. It speaks not in words but in instincts, in feelings that rise unbidden, impossible to ignore. A sudden distrust of overseers, a gnawing resentment toward the administratum scribes who demand higher quotas while food grows scarcer, a need, not fully understood, to gather with others in silence, eyes locking with unspoken recognition. At first the worker believes it to be madness born of fatigue. After all, the underhive breeds such sickness by the thousand. Men and women collapse in the tunnels every day, crushed by failing machinery or consumed by hunger. But madness does not explain the way strangers glance back with the same haunted gaze, the same twitch of devotion, as if they too have felt the touch. Madness does not explain the quiet gatherings in forgotten chambers where none speak yet all understand. There, in the half-light of lumen globes that flicker with age, they come together, dock loaders, data clerks, laborers and scum who would never otherwise share a glance. They stand shoulder to shoulder, wordless yet bound. At the center, the worker who first felt the claws realizes the truth with dreadful clarity. They are not alone. The touch was not random. It was the beginning of something vast, something patient. And then, one night the silence breaks. The figure that enters the gathering place is no longer fully human. Cloaked in ragged robes, its face half hidden, it moves with an unnatural assurance. Its voice is soft, distorted by the vox-scorched echoes of the chamber, yet it slides into every ear with hypnotic certainty. It speaks of family, of liberation, of a future free from the chains of terror and the Emperor's neglect. It speaks of the Star Children, who will descend from the void not as conquerors but as saviors. It speaks of the Great Father, whose touch ensures eternity. And the worker listening knows the truth before the robes are drawn back to reveal a face no longer entirely human. Eyes too large, teeth too sharp, skin carrying the faint shimmer of alien taint. They know because the voice within their skull hums in unison with the speaker's words. It is not merely indoctrination, it is communion. The Genestealer's curse is not only physical corruption, it is spiritual theft. Faith once offered to the Emperor withers like a candle starved of air. The Emperor becomes distant, an echo on the horizon of memory, while the alien presence grows immediate, intimate, a father's hand resting on the shoulder. Soon the worker cannot even remember the rhythm of their old prayers. The Emperor's name feels hollow on their tongue, while the new creed rises unbidden, filling the emptiness. Still, there are moments of resistance. Alone in their hab block, the worker trembles with guilt. They clutch their aquila, whispering desperate litanies through cracked lips, hoping to drown the alien pulse with the sound of their own voice. But each prayer feels weaker, emptier, while the presence waits patiently, not in anger but in certainty. It does not need to rush. The hive is vast, the nights are long, and hunger gnaws at every soul. Desperation is the soil in which the curse thrives best. So the worker yields, little by little, a glance held too long with a stranger in the crowd, a shift in posture when the robed figure passes, a willingness to listen when the sermons begin. Until one day, it is not guilt they feel, but pride. Pride in being chosen, in being marked. Pride in belonging to something greater than themselves, greater than the Imperium that has abandoned them. The worker's life, once a cycle of labor and hunger, now feels purposeful. They are no longer a faceless drone among billions. They are family, and though they cannot see it yet, The family grows with every passing night, spreading through habs and tunnels like roots through stone. Somewhere in the darkness, the Genestealer waits, patient and unseen, smiling in silence at the seed it has planted. Because corruption never begins with armies or invasions. It begins with a single touch in the dark, and once the touch is given, it can never be taken back. Not sudden. It creeps like a shadow across the worker's soul, subtle enough that they barely notice when the last pieces of their old self slip away. The hunger that once gnawed at their belly is still there, the labor in the manufactorum is no lighter, the smog-choked skies above the hive are no clearer. And yet, everything feels different. Each hardship is now framed as proof of their worthiness, each lash of the overseer is a test to be endured. In the silent communion of the gatherings, suffering is not meaningless, it is sanctified. The sermons deepen. The figure in rags no longer hides its alien features so carefully. Where once it spoke softly, now its words thunder with conviction, filling the chamber with a fervor so raw it sends shivers through the listeners. The Father watches, it proclaims. The family grows, and soon the star children will descend to claim their inheritance. The crowd shudders as one, their breaths aligning, their gazes fever bright. In that moment no one doubts. Not the dockhand who broke his back hauling Prometheum drums, not the scribe who lost his family to starvation, not the worker who once clutched an aquila in trembling hands. All of them believe. It is then that the rituals begin. Not grand ceremonies, not the brazen orgies of worship that the ecclesiarchy imagines in its fiery sermons, but small, intimate gestures that carry more weight than any cathedral liturgy. A drop of blood shared from palm to palm, a whispered oath spoken into the dark, a moment of stillness where all kneel together, not toward the emperor's throne on terror, but to the unseen presence that binds their minds like threads in a vast web. The worker feels the alien warmth seep deeper with every ritual. It is no longer only in their thoughts but in their blood, in their marrow, in the very rhythm of their heart. One night the figure approaches the worker directly. Its eyes gleam with unnatural light, its grin showing teeth too sharp to be human. Yet there is no fear. Instead, a rush of belonging floods the worker, so overwhelming they nearly weep. The figure places a clawed hand upon their shoulder and whispers of destiny. You were chosen. You felt the Father's touch first. You will lead others into the light. The words echo like scripture, and the worker bows, tears streaking their soot-stained cheeks. In that instant, the last barrier of resistance crumbles, but the hive is not blind. Whispers travel through the spires like smoke, rumors of strange gatherings, of workers who stare too long, of entire shifts moving with unnatural coordination. Enforcers tighten their patrols, arbitrators march through the lower levels with shock mauls and shotguns, and the ecclesiarchy's preachers scream ever louder, from cracked pulpits about heresy festering among the faithful. Yet for all their threats, the hive is too vast, its shadows too deep. The family moves unseen, spreading from hab to hab, manufactorum to manufactorum, one mind at a time, and the worker sees it. They see the city not as a place of rust and decay, but as fertile soil. They watch the family grow, hidden beneath the nose of the Imperium, and feel pride swell within them. This is no longer survival, this is destiny unfolding. The emperor's realm is brittle, the overseers blind, the preachers hollow, but the family is alive, burning with purpose, each heart beating as one. Still the worker dreams. In those dreams the skies split apart, great wings blot out the sun, and a presence far larger than any cathedral descends, its shadow stretching across the hive until the towers crumble. They do not fear the shadow, they welcome it, for in the dream they are not crushed but lifted into light, into eternity, into the embrace of the star children who wait among the stars. The worker wakes from these dreams trembling, heart racing, eyes wet with reverence. They know the time has not yet come, but it will. Every fiber of their being assures them of this. The family does not doubt, does not falter, does not forget. And when the sky finally tears open, they will be ready, because the first touch is never the end, it is the beginning. The hive above is a labyrinth of steel and smoke. but beneath it lies something far older, far more forgotten. Down there the air is thicker than oil, the walls slick with condensation that never sees sunlight. Generations of refuse, broken machines and the bones of the nameless have created layers so deep that even the cartographers of the administratum no longer chart them. The officials call these regions sub-levels, maintenance sectors, sump caverns. To those who live there, they are simply the underhive. It is here that the family takes its truest shape. Up above their sermons are whispers, their gatherings quick and hidden. But below, among the rusted cisterns and collapsed hab blocks, they can breathe freely. The family flourishes where the Imperium does not reach, where enforcers rarely dare to patrol, where arbites descend only with fire and bolter if they descend at all. The walls down here are painted not with devotional script to the Emperor, but with crude sigils daubed in blood and promethium ash, spirals, stars and the suggestion of alien forms whose meaning only initiates understand. The worker descends one night following the ragged preacher deeper than ever before. The sound of dripping water echoes like a metronome, boots crunching against brittle bone and discarded steel. Rats scurry through the shadows, fat from feeding on corpses left too long. Yet for the first time in years the worker does not feel fear in the dark. Instead they feel it welcome them, as though the walls themselves are alive with the same presence that has seeded their dreams. They arrive in a vast chamber that must once have been part of a filtration system, though its machines have long since rusted into immobility. Hundreds gather here, their bodies pressed close in the half-light of chemical torches, their eyes wide, shining with devotion. The air hums, not with sound alone but with the pressure of thought, the invisible weight of minds pressed together in a unity no human tongue could name. The worker feels it the moment they enter. That hum sinks into their bones, their pulse sinking with it until their heart beats in time with the crowd. They are no longer just one, they are part of something immense. The preacher ascends a broken pipe that juts like a pulpit from the ground, its silhouette monstrous in the flickering light. No longer does it bother to mask its alien heritage. The crowd does not recoil from its elongated limbs, its taloned hands, its face stretched too thin to be human. They adore it, reaching out their hands as if to brush against a prophet. Its voice fills the chamber, deeper now, resonant with an otherness that sends shivers through the lungs of all who listen. Children, it calls, and the echo lingers as though the word itself were alive. The father stirs, the family grows, the day of ascension approaches. The crowd shudders as one, a single body wrapped around a single mind. The worker joins the tide of voices chanting back, a rhythm of syllables that is not entirely human. They do not know the meaning, but they know the truth of it in their marrow. They see faces wet with tears of joy, hands trembling as if they touched divinity. Then the preacher calls for the offering. A man is led forward, bound in chains scavenged from a manufactorum line. He is no stranger to the worker, an enforcer, one of the few who dared to descend too deep in search of a missing patrol. His uniform is tattered, his face swollen from beatings, his eyes burning with hate and terror. He screams litanies to the emperor, spitting curses at the congregation. Yet his voice falters when he sees the preacher's face in full light, its alien beauty both hideous and divine. The crowd does not strike him, they do not jeer or spit. They kneel, one by one they bow their heads in silence, as though this broken man's hatred is a hymn to their strength. The preacher descends, claws curling gently under his chin, lifting his gaze upward. For a moment the chamber is still, then with a single movement, the preacher opens his throat. Blood sprays across the crowd, hot and metallic, painting the congregation in crimson devotion. Not a scream rises, not a cry of outrage. Instead the voices swell in rapture, a tidal wave of worship that shakes the walls. The worker is drenched in the man's lifeblood, and for the first time in their existence they feel whole. The preacher lifts its blood-soaked hands, and the crowd roars its ecstasy. In that moment the worker knows they are no longer human, they are something more. The chamber does not empty when the offering is finished. Instead it lingers like a wound that refuses to close. The congregation remains, their breathing a chorus of ragged ecstasy, their eyes reflecting firelight and devotion in equal measure. The corpse of the enforcer is carried away not as refuse but as relic, his blood-soaked chains kissed by those who pass them along. What once symbolized imperial order is now sanctified as proof of its weakness. The worker, still slick with the man's blood, feels no disgust. They feel only warmth, as if some hidden membrane within their chest has finally torn open to let the family inside. Their heart beats faster, not with panic but with revelation. They understand dimly why the sermon spoke of union, of one blood and one breath. It is not poetry, it is biology. Their body already knows it. Later, when the congregation disperses back into the arteries of the underhive, the worker finds themselves pulled into smaller gatherings. Families of flesh bound tighter than those of birth. Men and women who share dreams, who speak in half-finished sentences that others complete with uncanny precision. Even in silence they are not alone. Thought bleeds through touch, through gaze, through nothing at all. They begin to hear whispers not from mouths but from somewhere deeper. A call not in words but in need. The family does not dwell only in shadow. They extend their reach upward into the manufactoria where the worker once toiled. The seed of devotion takes root in exhausted minds, in the hollow eyes of laborers who long ago gave up prayer to the emperor that never answered them. A hand on the shoulder, a phrase murmured in a cant that makes no sense yet settles into the bones, and suddenly another joins them. Not with fanfare, not with rebellion, but with a quiet nod of recognition. The worker begins to notice things they never saw before. A foreman who deliberately diverts shipments, slipping crates into maintenance tunnels. A scribe who alters records with a trembling hand, ensuring that some families on the registry simply vanish. Servitors assigned to watch for sabotage mysteriously short-circuit, their once blank eyes now staring upward with faint smiles carved into lips not meant to smile. The family is everywhere, hidden in plain sight, not yet strong enough to show itself, but spreading, always spreading. The preacher meets them again, though now its words are softer, almost tender. No longer is it merely a herald of terror cloaked in ritual violence. It speaks of tomorrow, of preparation. It teaches that each offering feeds not only faith, but a beacon, a signal that carries further than any voxcaster, calling across the stars. The worker does not fully understand, but they do not need to. They feel the pulse of it in their bones, the tug of gravity that is not planetary but familial, cosmic. Not all embrace willingly. Some resist. There are those who cling to the emperor's corpse light with desperate hands, refusing to believe that salvation could take any other form. They fight, they betray, they scream denunciations. The family welcomes them too, but only once their screams have been cut short. To join the family one must be stripped of self. Willingly or unwillingly, all are made ready. One night, the worker is sent on their first true task. No longer merely a listener, no longer simply an initiate. They are given a blade forged from scavenged steel and a name, a clerk who has reported too much, who has begun to notice shipments that vanish and workers who never return. The workers' hands tremble, not from fear but from something stranger, anticipation, hunger. When they find the man alone in a record chamber, hunched over his data slate, the worker feels the presence of the family surge inside them. It steadies their hand, it guides the cut. The man does not even finish turning his head before his throat is opened, his blood watering the roots of something vast. When the worker returns, there is no scorn, no punishment for trembling, only embrace. Dozens of arms wrapping them in silent approval, a mind larger than theirs whispering through them, not in words but in warmth. They are not just part of the family now, they are useful, they are trusted. The underhive continues to shift. Rumors spread among the surface dwellers of disappearances, of gangs once feared now strangely silent, of manufactoria where quotas are met with eerie precision, despite dwindling populations. Few dare to descend, but those who do often do not return. Some speak of shapes moving in the dark, of eyes that glow faintly violet, of voices whispering in unison where no mouths move. The worker stands at the edge of this new order, gazing at the rusted pipes that stretch into the abyss below. They know now that the family is not limited to the hive, it is a seed waiting for the soil of the galaxy. Somewhere beyond the void, something stirs, and their voices, their prayers, their offerings all call to it. The worker shivers, not with dread, but with longing. The hive has always been a labyrinth of rust and shadow, its arteries choked with fumes, its walls sweating with condensation from pipes older than memory. But to the worker, it no longer feels like a prison, it feels alive. The family breathes through it. The dripping water is not mere runoff but a pulse. The vibration of tram lines and conveyor systems is not machinery but heartbeat. The worker walks through corridors that once filled them with despair, and now feels only belonging, as though the steel itself has opened its arms. The preacher teaches them that the family must weave itself into the hive so deeply that when the day of revelation comes, it cannot be torn out without tearing the hive itself apart. This is not done with banners or rebellion. It is done with patience, with silence, with the slow conversion of everything that sustains life. Water filters are blessed and corrupted, ensuring that those who drink from them begin to feel the whispers. Food supplies are touched by hands that carry spores unseen, flavoring every bite with devotion. Machinery is subtly altered, each change minor, each adjustment insignificant when viewed alone. But together the manufactoria now work in cadence with the family's rhythm, as though the very production of the hive beats to its hidden liturgy. The worker watches this spread with awe. Every act is both crime and prayer. To open a vent and let sacred dust drift into a drinking system is not sabotage, it is baptism. To smuggle crates of tools into the tunnels is not theft, it is preparation. Even silence itself becomes ritual. No one speaks of the family outside its sacred places, but all feel it, like a second skin clinging to their souls. Yet whispers of resistance echo through the levels above. Enforcer patrols grow more frequent. Administratum clerks notice discrepancies. The ecclesiarchy demands greater tithe from the manufactoria, claiming the people have grown lax in their faith to the emperor. But the worker no longer fears these pressures. For every patrol there is an ambush already waiting in the dark. For every clerk there is a blade blessed in the family's whispers. For every priest that preaches louder, there are hundreds below who have already abandoned the throne for the warm embrace of the new gospel. One evening, deep beneath the hive's mid-levels, the worker is brought to a gathering larger than any they have yet seen. Not dozens, hundreds, men, women, children, all huddled in a cavern carved out of rockcrete and rust. At the center, not a fire, but a pit glowing with bioluminescent light. From it rises a presence greater than the preacher, not a man, not a beast, but something between, its body twisted, crowned with ridges that glow faintly in the dim, its eyes reflecting the light of 1,000 unspoken promises. The preacher bows low, and the crowd follows, voices merging into one ceaseless chant. The worker bows too, trembling not with fear but with recognition. They feel the whispers inside them respond, louder now, echoing in harmony with the creature before them. This is no mere preacher. This is a herald, a vessel. The worker does not need to understand its shape nor its alien essence. It is family. It is proof that their prayers do not go unheard. The herald speaks not in words but in impressions that crawl directly into the mind. The family is growing. The hive is theirs. But this is not the end. The hive is only soil, and soil must break to release the seed. The worker sees images not of the underhive but of stars burning, of wings that blot out light, of hunger vast and eternal. They see themselves as a single cell in a greater body, not diminished by their smallness but exalted by their place within something infinite. The gathering ends in silence, each member departing as though nothing had happened, yet carrying the same flame inside. The worker walks back through the tunnels with the knowledge that there is no turning back, not for them, not for the hive. The family has sunk its tendrils too deep. The city above still believes itself in control, still believes the emperor's light keeps them safe, but below, in the arteries of rust and shadow, another truth is being written, and when it comes to the surface, it will not ask permission, it will devour. The family does not march. It does not announce itself with banners or horns. It spreads like moisture in stone, seeping into every crack until the wall itself begins to crumble from within. Above the underhive, where the air is marginally cleaner, and the guilders barter for their scraps of power, the cult's tendrils begin to coil with patience. The worker learns that faith is not only whispered in tunnels but traded in markets. Guild factors, bloated men who once scoffed at the suffering of the underclass, now receive gifts they cannot comprehend. A child they thought a beggar leaves them a vial of pure water in a world where every drop is tainted. A clerk receives the sudden disappearance of debts that had strangled their family for years. A foreman, long hated by his crews, awakens to find every tool in his manufactorum sharpened, cleaned and humming as though touched by divine hands. Each miracle leaves them bewildered, grateful and open to new loyalties. The family requires no sermons in such places. It requires only that those in power believe that their fortune has shifted. They never see the pale figures working in shadows, never hear the prayers stitched into their sudden blessings, and slowly, like rust gnawing iron, their allegiances turn, not to the emperor, not to the hive's governor, but to the unseen hand that makes their lives easier. The worker sees it in motion. Gangs once locked in endless blood feuds now meet in silence, their leaders clasping hands with awkward reverence, eyes glazed as though guided by a will greater than their own. Administratum scribes, once so diligent in their ledgers, now falsify records to cover for missing crates or altered production runs, never fully aware why they did it, only that it felt right. Even the enforcers are not untouched. Some return from patrols in the underhive with eyes too wide, voices softer, unable to explain the sudden urge to visit a certain drinking hole where whispers ride the air like smoke. But the family's expansion is not only political, it is physical, biological. Broodkin are born in increasing numbers. Some emerge twisted, their limbs longer than they should be, their eyes reflecting unnatural hues. Others look almost human, yet carry within them a charisma that disarms suspicion. Each one is embraced, never shunned, for every birth is a blessing. The worker, once an orphan of the manufactoria, now finds themselves with hundreds of siblings, and each sibling is willing to die for the other, not in despair but in joy, for they believe their death feeds a greater life. The expansion is invisible to those who refuse to look closely. The hive governor still delivers his pompous speeches from his gilded balcony, secure in his belief that the tithe quotas prove stability. The ecclesiarchy still rails against the sins of apathy, urging the people to attend shrines that grow emptier each month. The mechanicus still clings to its data, blind to the hands that slowly twist machinery to different rhythms. To the authorities, nothing has changed. The hive continues to function, and function is all that matters. But to those below, everything has changed. The worker now walks through streets where even strangers glance at one another with knowing eyes, a silent acknowledgement that they are kin, bound not by law but by blood deeper than humanity. It is not rebellion, not yet. It is something slower, subtler, more terrifying. It is inevitability, wearing the mask of patience. The worker begins to dream again, but now the dreams are not confined to tunnels and whispers. They dream of corridors opening into lightless skies, of countless bodies moving as one tide, of stars plucked from the void like fruit from a tree. They awaken each morning drenched in sweat, heart hammering, yet smiling, for they know the dreams are not theirs alone. They belong to the family, to the presence that guides them all. And still the expansion continues, silent and unseen, weaving itself deeper into the hive's arteries, a tide rising beneath stone, a storm building beneath silence, a future already written though no one above dares to read the script. The first killings are not spoken of in public, though everyone feels their echo. A guild factor is found slumped across his desk, a look of peace frozen on his face, though his chest is torn open with surgical precision. A scribe is discovered deep within the Administratum Archives, her fingers still resting on a half-finished data slate, her throat opened in a manner too clean for any hive ganger's blade. Enforcers mutter of gang reprisals, the Arbites scoff at bureaucratic incompetence, and the ecclesiarchy whispers of divine punishment for corruption. But those who belong to the family know the truth. These were not deaths of chaos. They were offerings, carefully placed, removing obstacles without shattering the hive's brittle facade of order. The worker remembers the first time they stood near one of these acts. They had been sent to shadow a noble's courier, a thin man who carried documents sealed with the sigil of the planetary governor himself. The courier never reached the palace. Instead, he disappeared into an alley that did not exist on any sanctioned map, where shadows bent too long and voices whispered from walls slick with condensation. When he emerged, it was not as a man but as a husk, eyes hollow, his sealed message gone. The worker felt no horror, only awe. They understood that the family had grown beyond survival. It had become purpose, destiny given shape. Sabotage follows the assassinations. At first it is small. A generator plant sputters and fails, plunging hab blocks into darkness while food convoys vanish into the underhive. A mining drill collapses its shaft prematurely, swallowing overseers in a tide of stone while leaving workers miraculously unharmed. A promethium reservoir erupts in fire, but no family members are among the dead. The hive interprets it as bad luck, poor maintenance, the natural decay of a world stretched thin by centuries of exploitation. Yet beneath the cover of this decay, the family grows stronger. For the worker, life becomes a pattern of shadows. They learn the routes of enforcer patrols not from rumor but from instinct, as though the information is etched into their blood. They carry messages written in codes that appear to outsiders as smears of grease or stains of oil. They witness gatherings where hundreds kneel in perfect silence, waiting for a voice that never needs to be raised. It is not discipline that binds them. It is devotion, an unbreakable tether that pulls every thought, every heartbeat, toward one end. Even the gangs are transformed. Where once they fought for territory and scraps of narcotics, they now guard routes vital to the family's expansion. They do not understand the full purpose of their obedience, but they no longer need to. Their leaders dream of pale figures guiding them, their weapons gifted in exchange for fealty. When they fight now, it is not for themselves. It is for the tide rising beneath their feet. The worker notices the shift most keenly in the silence. The hive is never quiet. Its heart beats with machines, with shouting merchants, with the endless hum of labor. Yet in the spaces claimed by the family, there is a hush that lingers, a reverence that muffles even violence. Fights end before they begin. Deals are struck with nods rather than shouts. Even children, once loud and unruly, play their games in near meditative quiet, as though rehearsing for a future they do not yet fully grasp. And through it all, the worker feels the gaze. It is not human, not entirely, but it is close enough to touch their soul. They sense it in the corner of their eye when walking through torchlit tunnels. They hear it in the cadence of voices that rise together in prayer. They feel it in their bones when their body moves with a precision they did not learn, when their reflexes respond faster than thought. The gaze is love, and it is hunger, and it is endless. The assassinations and sabotage never aim to overthrow the hive outright. Not yet. They are only strokes of the brush, painting a larger picture no one else can see. And as the worker watches, they realize that the family has already won more than any rebellion could. It has rewritten the hive's rhythm, made its heartbeat match their own. The governor's speeches, the ecclesiarchy's sermons, the arbite's decrees, they are all noise now, hollow words bouncing off walls already claimed by another power. The silent expansion is no longer confined to shadows. It has become the air itself, invisible, inevitable, and inescapable. The first time the worker sees a weapon consecrated in the family's name, it is not in battle but in ritual. A rusted lasgun, barely functional, is lifted high in the dim glow of chem lamps. Its surface has been scoured clean of imperial markings, replaced with carvings etched by steady, loving hands. They are not words, not symbols of any language the worker has ever seen, but patterns that pulse with meaning. As the weapon is passed from hand to hand, each devotee touches it as though it were flesh, not iron. When it comes to the worker, their fingers tremble, not from fear but from certainty. This lasgun is no longer a tool, it is a promise, one that speaks of the future with more clarity than any speech ever could. The cult's expansion is never loud, but it becomes impossible to ignore. Whole manufactorums fall into their grasp without a single shot fired. Overseers vanish, replaced by figures whose faces seem familiar yet strangely wrong, as though their features have been borrowed and worn like masks. The adeptus arbites launch raids, sealing hab blocks and scouring tunnels, but they find nothing but silence and walls that seem to shift behind them. For every family member taken in chains, 3 more emerge from shadows indistinguishable from the billions around them. The Arbite's strength is force, the family's strength is inevitability. The worker's role deepens. They are no longer just a carrier of messages or a witness to miracles. They are a seed-bearer, entrusted with spreading whispers where fear is strongest. Their task is not to persuade, not to argue or convert, but simply to speak words that fall into minds already ready to hear them. They murmur of unity in drinking halls, of freedom in the ears of broken laborers, of purpose to those who stagger home with nothing but scars. Sometimes the worker forgets the words as soon as they say them, yet they see the effect in the eyes of their listeners, pupils dilating as though catching sight of something beyond the walls of the hive. And then comes the day when the worker realizes they no longer dream alone. Sleep is a rarity, always thin, always fragile in the noise of hive life. Yet now their dreams are rich, shared landscapes where thousands walk side by side, their footsteps echoing across endless plains of bone and chitin. The worker sees others in these dreams, faces they know from tunnels and work pits, and faces of strangers they have never met but recognize instantly. They march together beneath a sky that is not a sky, a canopy alive with wings that blot out stars. When they wake, they are not exhausted. They are filled. Assassinations grow bolder. A governor's aide is found torn apart within a sealed chamber. No locks forced, no alarms triggered. An ecclesiarchy preacher vanishes mid-sermon, one moment railing against heresy, the next a smear of blood upon a pulpit. The hive quivers with fear, yet the family thrives on it. Rumors spread of monsters, of shadows with too many limbs, of faces melting into new forms, but these are never caught, never proven. To the worker the rumors are not fear, they are heralds, cracks in the veil, proof that the family's truth is seeping into the collective mind of the hive. It is in this silence between fear and revelation that the worker sees the first true sign. In a hidden chamber, walls slick with condensation, a figure stands that is neither fully man nor fully other. Its limbs are elongated, its eyes glisten with an alien sheen, and yet it smiles with the warmth of kin. Around it kneel dozens, whispering prayers that sound like hisses, words that click against teeth not yet grown. The worker drops to their knees without command. They do not feel terror, only recognition. This is what the silence has been leading to. This is the seed-breaking soil, the moment when hidden roots burst upward into the light. The hive above still clings to its fragile order. The governor issues decrees. The Arbites sharpen their blades. The ecclesiarchy cries louder than ever. But none of it matters. The family has already rewritten the laws of existence beneath their feet. The expansion is not silent anymore. It is waiting, holding its breath, poised on the edge of revelation, and when it exhales, there will be no going back. The hive trembles long before anyone dares admit it. At first, it is only a subtle change, a low vibration that seems to linger in the bones rather than the walls. The worker hears it in the stillness between machinery strikes, in the rare silences of the hab blocks. It is not the familiar hum of the manufactorum or the groan of metal under strain. It is something deeper, something alive. For a time, they wonder if it is madness, if exhaustion has finally unstitched their senses. But when they glance at their fellow laborers, they see the same flicker in their eyes, the same unspoken recognition. The sound is not a sound, it is a pulse, and it is growing louder. The Arbites patrols double, their black carapace armor glinting beneath hive lamps. Ecclesiarchy sermons rise in pitch, their priests trembling as they invoke the Emperor's light with voices that crack on every syllable. Yet the fear they mean to dispel only thickens. The people of the hive cannot name it, but they feel it. Crops of fungus rot too quickly in their nutrient vats, vermin flee from tunnels once teeming with them, and even the air recyclers stutter, as though the hive itself were choking on unseen fumes. The worker knows what the others do not. The family is stirring, and the world is beginning to bend in preparation. The worker's own body changes in ways they do not understand. A heightened sense of smell catches the tang of rust in the air before pipes burst. Their hands grow steadier, even as exhaustion gnaws deeper than ever. Hunger ceases to matter. Food is swallowed without taste, but their strength remains. They do not question it. These are not curses. They are gifts, and each gift is proof that their place in the family is no longer small. They are a vessel, and vessels are meant to carry more than themselves. The first open defiance arrives like a wound ripped into the surface of the hive's order. A manufactorum foreman is dragged from his throne chair by his own laborers, his voice drowned beneath a chorus of whispers. The Arbites descend in fury, shock mauls crackling, shotguns roaring, but when the smoke clears, nothing remains of the rebels but absence. No bodies, no blood, no evidence of where they have gone. It is as though the hive swallowed them whole. The Arbites call it cowardice. The family calls it ascension. Whispers spread of shapes moving across the spires, seen only at the edge of sight. One night, a pilgrim caravan bound for the shrine of Saint Luciana disappears into a lower-level tunnel. A week later, their relics are found displayed in a hidden alcove deep below the habs, arranged in patterns that seem meaningless to the Arbites but strike the worker with profound clarity. They are maps, not of land, but of flesh and destiny. Each skull, each broken icon, is a point upon a constellation no imperial astronomer has ever charted. The workers' dreams deepen. Now they no longer march across bone plains. Instead they kneel in cathedrals of living matter, walls that throb with veins and eyes that open like flowers to watch. They do not walk alone. The not quite human figure from the hidden chamber walks beside them, its presence warm and commanding, its voice resonating without words. When they wake, their cheeks are wet with tears, though they cannot say if they cried in fear, in devotion, or in joy. Perhaps it no longer matters. Above, the governor issues decrees of martial law. Whole districts are purged by fire, thousands burned to ash to stop whispers that cannot be silenced. But the worker knows the truth. Fire does not erase seeds already planted. The ash only feeds them. The family has not been broken. It is flowering, and deep within the hive's bones, something stirs in response. The pulse grows stronger, no longer faint, no longer hidden. It echoes now through ferrocrete walls and dripping pipes, through vox static and the murmur of prayers. The worker feels it in their chest, in the marrow of their bones, in the breath of every shadowed corridor. It is not a question of when the awakening will come. It is already here. The worker once believed the hive was eternal. Its towers seemed to pierce the firmament itself, its foundations driven so deep into the planet's crust that nothing short of planetary death could ever dislodge them. Now, as days blur into nights without boundary, they see how fragile it has always been. Steel groans like wounded flesh. Power grids shudder. Whole sublevels vanish in sudden cave-ins, their populations erased in an instant, remembered only by the dust that clogs the vents. The administratum reports these collapses as accidents. The Arbites declare them sabotage. But the family knows, the hive is not breaking, it is transforming. Everywhere the signs multiply. Murals appear overnight upon ferrocrete walls, painted in strange pigments that shimmer unnaturally beneath lumen strips. They depict figures with too many arms, with eyes that are not eyes, with mouths open in silent hymns. The Arbites scour them away by torchlight, but by dawn, new ones bloom again in places they cannot patrol. The worker stands before one and feels their heart twist. The painted figure bears their face, yet its arms are elongated, its flesh patterned with ridges, its gaze alight with something more than human thought. It is not vandalism, it is prophecy. The worker's labor shifts from meaningless toil to hidden service. No longer do they bend beneath the weight of the governor's quotas. Now they haul crates of stolen rations through blind corridors, guiding the hungry into sanctums lit by bioluminescent growths that cling to the walls like living stars. The family grows stronger in these hidden places, their voices joining in whispers that swell like tides. Infants are brought forward to be touched by hands that no longer seem entirely human, and the cries of the newly blessed ring out with uncanny tones that pierce the heart. But the surface world resists. Regiments of the Astra Militarum are deployed within the hive, their boots pounding upon ferrocrete as tanks grind through once sacred markets. Curfews choke the life from whole sectors. Workers vanish in mass arrests, their names scrubbed from data slates as though they never existed. The worker watches the black-armored soldiers drag neighbors into waiting transports, hears the pleading, the screams cut short by rifle butts, and yet they feel no despair. Fear would mean the emperor still ruled their heart. He does not. They are not losing their people, they are gathering them. In the manufactorum, production slows. Machines break down with uncanny frequency, their cogs clogged by substances that no engine seer can identify. Data feeds show efficiency dropping by the day, and the governor rages in his high spire, his voice carried through the voxnet with growing desperation. He calls for loyalty, for sacrifice, for obedience. But the worker hears only weakness, the faltering tone of a man who feels the ground shifting beneath him. The family does not hear him at all. Their ears are tuned elsewhere, straining for a rhythm that beats louder than any vox hymn. The worker dreams again. This time they do not walk. They are carried. A vast shadow lifts them in its claws, wings blotting out stars, a maw filled with endless rows of teeth. And yet there is no fear. They feel the heat of its breath, the press of its mind against theirs, the knowledge that they are not prey, but part of something that has no boundary. When they wake, their body trembles with awe. They know the shadow is real. They know it waits among the void. By now, entire districts live by the family's law. Imperial edicts are ignored. Arbeits patrols vanish, and still the worker sees no chaos, no descent into madness. There is order here, a purer order than the Imperium ever offered. Food is shared, work is purposeful. Prayers are whispered not to a corpse upon a throne, but to something vast and immediate, something that answers in pulses of the hive's veins. The worker feels pride swelling in their chest. For the first time, life is not survival, it is destiny. The governor cannot stop what has already taken root. The astra militarum cannot comprehend it. The ecclesiarchy cannot exercise it. And still, the family whispers the awakening is not yet complete. This is only the first stir, the tremor before the true quake. What slumbers in the deep? The hive begins to hum. At first it is mistaken for failing generators, the resonance of overworked turbines, the tremor of engines struggling against decay. But the worker knows better. The sound does not come from the machines. It comes from the walls themselves, from the bones of the city, from the foundations driven deep into the planet's crust. It is a rhythm without origin, echoing through ferrocrete and steel, rattling the teeth of every soul within earshot. Those who are blind to the family clutch their ears and wail in panic. Those who belong fall to their knees, trembling in ecstasy. The worker joins the throng in the hidden sanctum, packed shoulder to shoulder with faces pale from exhaustion yet radiant with conviction. Their breath mingles with the musk of incense and oil, their chants rising to merge with the low thrumming that vibrates through the hive. The patriarch moves among them, immense and sacred, its limbs spreading wide like a grotesque benediction. It does not speak, yet all hear its command. Its mind threads through theirs, weaving thought into thought, fear into hope, weakness into purpose. On the surface, the governor's palace is besieged by whispers. Courtiers and ministers report that entire districts no longer obey. Whole regiments of the Astra Militarum have gone silent, their barracks abandoned, their vox grills broadcasting nothing but static. Administratum scribes burn through parchment and data slates alike, but no decree they issue has power. The imperial aquila carved upon the hive's spires is defaced by dawn each day, replaced with a new sigil, an alien shape at once insectile and divine. No matter how many servitors polish, no matter how many workers are lashed, the mark reappears. The symbol multiplies, unstoppable like a living thing. The worker walks through the manufactoren for the last time, passing machines that once devoured their strength. Now the assembly lines lie still, their engines stripped for parts, their steel skeletons gutted. The family has no need of imperial quotas, the family has greater designs. Cargo lifts ferry not munitions but bodies, food and sacred artifacts stolen from shrines. The air tastes different, heavy with the scent of growth. The worker breathes it deep and feels their lungs expand with a vitality they never knew. They are not starving, they are not weak, they are becoming. Then the dreams spread beyond the worker. Children speak of shapes in the void with familiarity, drawing creatures they should not know upon ragged scraps of cloth. Soldiers desert their posts to follow the hymns that echo from the underhive. Preachers abandon the emperor's litanies mid-sermon and kneel before congregations, weeping as they proclaim visions of something vast approaching. The hive has become a single mind straining toward the same horizon. The worker feels it too. When they close their eyes they see stars devoured, worlds falling silent one by one, a great tide sweeping across the galaxy, and they feel no dread. To belong to the tide is not annihilation, it is perfection. The Imperium has always lied. What it calls extinction the family names ascension. When the hum deepens into a roar, and the sky above the hive splits with the flare of incoming shapes, the worker smiles. For the first time in their life, they are not afraid of what comes. They are ready. The night sky above the hive is no longer black. It burns. At first it seems as though the heavens themselves have caught fire, streaks of light ripping through the void as though stars are being torn apart. Sirens wail across the spires, shrill and panicked, but they are drowned beneath the thunder of the heavens. The Imperium calls it invasion. The family knows it as deliverance. The worker stands among the throng at the edge of the manufactorum's collapsed roof, looking upward through choking ash. The sight is impossible, unbearable, yet beautiful. Great shapes cut through the void, not of iron or steel but of flesh and bone, vast and alive. Their hulls ripple as though with breath, their carapaces shimmering in the starlight. They move not like ships, but like predators, flowing with terrible grace. These are not machines piloted by men. They are entities, as alive as the patriarch, as alive as the worker themselves. The fleet has come. Around the hive, Vox traffic erupts in madness. Administratum officials scream reports of descending spores. The Astra Militarum issues broken orders, fragments of defiance laced with terror. They shout of chitinous claws and fanged maws, of engines drowned in acid, of regiments vanishing beneath tides of creatures too numerous to count. But their words fall apart in static, lost beneath the raw psychic storm swelling in the atmosphere. The shadow in the warp, whispered about in every astropathic choir, now presses down like an ocean. Thought itself buckles. The air tastes of copper and salt. Dreams become indistinguishable from waking sight. The worker hears every voice around them rise in chorus. They do not scream in terror, but cry out in worship. They are here. They murmur again and again, the words carried on trembling lips as though part of a hymn older than the Imperium itself. Hands are raised, faces are lifted, and across the sanctums and the avenues the family welcomes the tide. Yet the worker feels a flicker of unease. For years the patriarch has been the voice of certainty, but now it is silent. Its psychic shadow still clings to the minds of its children, binding them, soothing them, urging them to embrace. But it no longer guides with clarity. It waits, and in that waiting there is a silence that feels like teeth held behind a smile. The first spore impacts with the violence of a falling star. The ground quakes, ferrocrete buckles, and entire hab blocks collapse into fire. From the wound in the earth crawl shapes of nightmare, creatures born from chitin and sinew, their forms wet with ichor, their movements swift and sure. They pour into the streets, talons rending, tongues lashing, acid spilling onto stone and flesh alike. Soldiers who still cling to the Aquila fire las guns in wild desperation, their beams cutting down dozens, but for every creature slain, another 10 emerge. There is no end. There is no pause. The tide has no weakness. The worker moves with the family, swept in a wave of bodies through the hive's arteries, each member clutching crude weapons, offerings, relics. They do not fight to resist. They fight to embrace, to slow the imperial defenders, to pull them down screaming into the tide, to welcome the claws as if they were the hands of angels. The worker strikes with a rusted blade, not at the creatures of the fleet, but at the men who still bear the emperor's sigil. Their blood is warm, their cries sharp. For the first time the worker does not feel small. They are not expendable. They are a vessel of destiny, and above all in the ash-choked sky, the greatest shadow descends. Larger than any cathedral, larger than the hive's tallest spire, a monstrous form eclipses the stars. Its wings stretch wide as valleys, its maw glowing with internal fire, its every motion bending the air. To the Imperium it is a terror beyond words. To the family it is the promised parent, the culmination of every whispered hymn, every sleepless night, every sacrifice. The sky itself has opened, and through it pours the hunger that will make the world whole. The worker falls to their knees as the ground splits beneath them. All around the family chants in unison. They do not name it in words. They simply open their minds and let it in. The spore storms do not relent. One after another they crash into the hive's broken flanks, each strike peeling open a new wound that bleeds fire, acid, and chitin. The air is thick with ash, dust, and pheromones so strong they sting the lungs. Every breath tastes of rust and rotting fruit. The sky itself writhes as though alive, split by flashes of violet lightning, echoes of the psychic presence smothering the planet. It is not simply a shadow, it is pressure, vast and immeasurable, crushing every human thought into trembling fragments. The worker moves through the chaos with the family, carried along like a drop of blood in a rushing artery. Every corridor of the hive echoes with screams, hymns, and the crackling discharge of lasfire. The family chants, not with fear, but devotion, their voices rising even as creatures tear through the streets. Four-armed monsters leap from broken walls, ripping men from their armor as though peeling shells from fruit. Smaller, skittering beasts flood from vents and shattered ducts, swarming over Imperial positions like an avalanche of claws. For every Imperial who fights, 3 are dragged down. The worker watches a squad of Astra Militarum soldiers make their stand near a collapsed roadway. They are children themselves, barely older than the worker, clad in flak armor already scorched black by acid. They fire until their rifles overheat, screaming their emperor's name as they vanish beneath the swarm. Their sergeant bellows prayers, his face incandescent with fury, before a talon drives clean through his chest. His vox grill gurgles static, then falls silent. In the worker's heart there is no pity, only triumph. For each fallen soldier the family grows closer to reunion. And yet something gnaws at them. The patriarch's silence has not broken. Its presence lingers, but it is blurred, almost drowned beneath the storm. The worker feels it like a fading memory, a hand that once guided, now distant and dim. Instead there is another voice, vast, wordless, and hungry. It does not soothe. It does not promise. It only pulls. In the underhive, entire districts surrender themselves willingly. Families, children, the broken and forgotten pour into the streets, raising their hands as the creatures descend. They do not resist as talons carve through flesh. They weep with joy even as they are devoured. The worker sees a mother press her infant forward to a looming monstrosity, her face shining with rapture as its jaws close around the child. She does not scream. She sings. For her this is no ending. It is the promise fulfilled. But when the worker witnesses this, the unease deepens. It is one thing to fight and be claimed. It is another to be swallowed whole. The hymns of the family speak of unity, of transcendence, of becoming greater. But the creatures do not pause to whisper. They do not bless. They consume. Every soul, every body becomes fuel, and still the family calls it love. As the tide presses inward, the imperial bastions collapse. The worker glimpses a chimera transport overturned in a firestorm, its crew still trapped within, pounding against armored hatches as acid eats through the hull. They hear the screams of an Arbite's precinct as the roof buckles beneath the weight of descending beasts. Even the ecclesiarchy's grand temple crumbles, its gilded aquila falling into the ash. The priesthood burns on the steps, their prayers cut short, their robes ignited in promethium fire spilled by ruptured tanks. The worker feels themselves trembling, not from fear, but from awe. It is not the Imperium's collapse that shakes them. It is the immensity of what they witness, the sheer inevitability of it. No hive, no fortress, no army could resist such hunger. The Imperium speaks of eternal dominion, of unyielding strength, but before this tide, all its promises are dust. The worker's blade is rusted, their body weak, their soul small. And yet somehow they are part of something greater than every fleet, every throne, every star, and then they see it, at last. The vast shadow eclipsing the hive lowers further, its bulk tearing clouds apart. Its body is not a ship nor a beast, but something between. Its surface writhes with tendrils, its underbelly stuck. The air itself seems to buckle as the shadow descends, pressing the hive into the bones of the earth. The sky is no longer a place of clouds or smoke, it is a living ceiling of flesh and chitin, a cathedral of hunger that dwarfs all comprehension. The worker clutches their chest, as though their heart will rupture beneath the weight of that presence. It is not the patriarch, it is not the father who whispered promises in the dark. This is something vaster, something unrelenting, a mind so immense that their own thoughts dissolve like motes of dust in a furnace. Around them, the family howls with ecstasy. They tear at their garments, smear blood across their faces, and press their foreheads to the broken ground. They chant of the great devourer, the god of claws and silence, the final embrace. Their voices rise higher than the thunder of collapsing hab blocks, higher than the screams of imperial defenders being dragged into the swarm. The worker mouths the words, but they are hollow. Each syllable tastes like ash. The tide of creatures thickens. Where once there were scattered beasts and hunting packs, now there is a river of flesh, converging on the hive's heart. They pour through shattered gates, scaling walls slick with gore, flooding avenues with such density that the streets vanish beneath them. Those who fall are not left behind. They are consumed, stripped to bone before they strike the ground, their remains dissolved into the flow. The worker stumbles as the family surges forward, drawn toward the core of the hive like iron filings pulled by a magnet. They try to keep pace, but their thoughts drag behind. The patriarch's voice is faint now, flickering like a candle in a storm. For so long it was the only truth they knew. Now it is drowned beneath the hunger of something that does not whisper, something that does not care. At the edge of the great plaza, they witness the culmination. The spire that once housed the planetary governor stands shattered, its golden aquila lying in the dust like a broken corpse. Upon the ruins the swarm gathers, bodies piling upon bodies until the stone vanishes. The air quakes as the first of the great tendrils descends, fleshy cables thick as fortress towers, piercing deep into the ground. They pulse, alive, throbbing with some obscene rhythm. The earth groans and a sound like a billion knives scraping glass floods the air. The worker falls to their knees with the rest, unable to resist the pressure. The family weeps and sings, raising their hands as the tendrils anchor themselves. For them this is transcendence. This is the promise made flesh. But the worker sees what happens next, and in that vision the last ember of doubt ignites into a fire. The tendrils drink, not metaphor, not symbol, drink. They suck the life from the soil, strip the stone to powder, leach the marrow from the bones of the dead. They drink the living too. Those closest to the tendrils shriek as their bodies wither, collapsing into husks before being swept into the tide. Even the family is not spared. Those who once sang with joy are drained to silence, their skin clinging to bone, their eyes dimming like dying stars. And yet, in their final breath they smile. The worker cannot. Their voice catches in their throat, strangled by the weight of truth. This is no union, no promised homecoming. There is no ascension,